Now, be it through the use of NGOs, the CIA, you name it. There's a long history of U.S. intervention in the affairs of other nations, from supposedly democratic elections to backing military coups, and Haiti is no exception to that. In the most recent Haitian election last November, nearly 3/4 of the Haitian population didn't vote. And not because they're an apolitical, disinterested people, because the most popular political party in the country was excluded from the ballot, thanks to Washington's influence. So why does Washington pledge money and yet thwart democracy in Haiti all at the same time? Well, joining me to discuss it is Mark Weisborough, co-director of the Center for Economic and Policy Research. Mark, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
The U.S. clearly has a long history when it comes to Haiti, but let's look at perhaps more recent events. I mean, we saw with the earthquake a year ago where the U.S. pledged $2 billion in aid. If we look back just a couple of years before that to the coup, which we helped back, we cut off all aid to the country. I mean, it just doesn't really make sense. Explain our policy here.
Well, I think a lot of the policy is directed towards controlling who governs the country. In 2000, as you mentioned, they cut off all aid for 4 years. It wasn't just the U.S. They got other countries, France and Canada, to cut off all aid to the country until it destroyed the economy. And then they poured, of course, tens of millions of dollars into a very poor country to build up an opposition movement that was intent on overthrowing the government, which they finally did in 2004. And then after that, thousands of the supporters of the government officials were actually, thrown in jail, and many people were killed in the aftermath of the coup. And then they got, of course, the UN force to occupy the country.
Why is it in our interest to do all of this? Especially, I mean, because what we hear from the U.S., right, what we hear from our public officials is that they support Haiti. They want to do everything they can to help this country. That they supposedly support democracy, although this latest election is not democratic by my standards.
Well, it's not in our interest, like me and you and the majority of people in the U.S., but I think the people who run the State Department, they look at it in terms of power. It's just another country that they want to control, and because it's so poor and weak, they figure they can actually do it.
But what's the point of controlling Haiti? I mean, honestly, you know, Haiti is a tiny nation. There aren't that many people. I mean, politically, when it comes to the global stage, do they have a lot of influence? Can they get a lot of other people on our side if we needed them to?
No,
it's just domination?
Well, they look at it strategically. It's like a chess game to them where the pawns matter. And so why did our government support the military coup government in Honduras last year? That's the second poorest country in the hemisphere. Doesn't seem strategically important, although they do have the United States does have a military base there. But, you know, who knows? They could have one in Haiti someday. They're looking at it in terms of just straight power, and every country matters. You know, there was a WikiLeaks cable that was released just recently that explains somewhere where they talk about President Preval, the current president of Haiti, and how they're worried that he might get money from Hugo Chavez in Venezuela. Not that everybody else in the Caribbean isn't getting something from Venezuela, but nonetheless, they want to make sure that everybody is lined up with their foreign policy for the region. So even the poor countries matter to them. But
when it comes to, let's say, you know, Latin America specifically, the rest of Latin America doesn't necessarily fall in line, right? If we look at the coup in Venezuela earlier, the people will protest that, but are they now in some way complicit because there are UN forces from Latin American countries in Haiti? I mean, are they in essence supporting the U.S. actions?
Well, they are not opposing it the way they did, for example, the coup in Honduras. You know, they fought very hard against our Secretary of State, who was trying to get the OAS to take the same position as the United States. And in fact, Honduras, this was in 2009, Honduras still hasn't been readmitted to the Organization of American States because of the opposition of South America, because they want some human rights guarantees for Honduras before they will change their position. On Haiti, there hasn't been that kind of resistance, and that's why the United States is able to do it. We're sure, you know, it's still fluid. It's not clear that this OAS report is going to stick. They're trying to change the results of the election based on a very faulty statistical analysis and of the vote, and it's not clear that it's going to be accepted. It's not even clear that all the other countries in the hemisphere will go along with it. But it's true, they haven't opposed a U.S. policy on Haiti the way they did on Honduras, on Venezuela, and in other situations.
I want to talk about the role that NGOs play. I mean, currently there's one NGO for every 1,000 people in Haiti. And so, you know, how do we compare their influence to the influence of the U.S. government, let's say?
Well, I don't think you can lump them all together. You have groups like Partners in Health, for example, which has over 5,000 people on the ground, Doctors Without Borders, and I think they're really doing the best they can, and they have spoken out too. For example, when right after the earthquake, the United States was flying in military, and they were taking up planes to bring in military when Doctors Without Borders was trying to bring in hospital equipment. They spoke out very strongly, and there was a change. And Partners in Health is like that as well. And but mostly, I would say a lot of, maybe most of the NGOs are trying to do their best, but you know, there's a lot of difficulty. There's not coordination. The government itself, you know, a lot of their ministries were destroyed by the earthquake. People were killed. That hasn't built back up because the international donors don't particularly care about having a functioning government, and in fact, some of them might not even want one.
How do you think Americans would feel? Because, you know, after this earthquake in Haiti, everybody saw this tragedy on TV, and I think that a lot of Americans donated from their heart. Everybody wanted to give money to help, but if they knew what was really going on there, I mean, would they approve of that?
No, I mean, I gave my money to Partners in Health because I know them, I know who they are.
But it's hard to pick, right? How do you know
that's
who
right.
you're giving
and I
money
think,
to?
For example, the International Red Cross, by their own numbers, has only spent 45% of the money that they got. Now, I think that people that gave them money, they would be thinking, well, that money's for immediate relief. These people need shelter. You got 1 million people still displaced, still more than 1 million living, and they're living under tarps. Most of them don't even have tents. You know, the ground underneath them turns to mud when it rains. I'm sure you've seen the pictures. There's no excuse for that. There's money for that. They could at least have tents, and they could have more permanent housing as well. So I think that people that gave money, they expected that money was not going to be used for some long-term plan, but really for immediate relief for the Haitian people, and they have a right to be disappointed about that.
Yeah, and that's something that you aren't seeing enough of. We just spoke to a reporter who was on the ground there in Haiti and said that people kind of laughed at the word of progress because they've seen so little of it. Mark, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.